Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge YouTube channel and to highlights of Stage 4 of Paris 2021. A very hilly stage, 188 kilometers long, finishing in Chiroubles. I think there was over 3,300 meters elevation gain throughout the stage. And you can see the placement of the last intermediate sprint point. Remember that it's halfway up this final climb, which is a very undulating climb. And if you like these highlight videos that I've been banging out, make sure you like them down below. It does make a big difference to the channel and how the videos go. This graphic shows it best from the Flamme Rouge. Two sustained steep sections in the first half of the climb. There's even a small bit of descending. And that intermediate sprint is at the end of that second steep section. Absolutely perfect for Roglič, but it was Stefan Bissegger who won the individual time trial yesterday in the yellow jersey. Very unlikely that he'd be able to keep it. A breakaway with Rojas, Perez, Naesen, Duby, the KOM leader at the moment, went up the road. And it was mostly Jumbo-Visma keeping them in check. They kept the gap between 2 and 3 minutes for most of the day on this rolly course, doing multiple ascents of Montbrouilly. But this up and down course started to take its toll on Stefan Bissegger, and it looked almost certain that he would lose the leader's jersey, given that he was only a handful of seconds ahead of Roglič and co. Ineos tried something before the last ascent of Montbrouilly. You see them moving up with Amador and Swift on the right. Then they attacked with Laurens de Plus on the right-hand side, with Dylan van Baarle in front of Tao Geoghegan on the left-hand side. And you'll notice something. Roglič on the right-hand side of Jai Hindley, as we look at it, is isolated. Kruijswijk, Oomen, Bennett are all behind him. Tony Martin had fallen back because he'd been pacing all day, so he wasn't in this group anymore. I think if there's any positives to take out of today for Roglic's GC rivals in the future, it is that in undulating or flat terrain, it is relatively easy to isolate him. This de Plus attack before Montbrouilly didn't really amount to much. I think even DSM chased it back with Hindley for Benoit. They then attacked with Casper Pedersen, I think, on the base of the climb, but by this point Jumbo-Visma brought forward Oomen, Kruijswijk and Bennett to pace him back. And after that, Jumbo-Visma put George Bennett on the front to keep things together on this last ascent of Montbrouilly, which crests about 21 k's from the finish. There's then this fast, technical, twisty descent, very narrow as you can see, and Tao Geoghegan through this fast hairpin slid out middle of the hairpin and took David Gaudu with him, who was behind him on his wheel. It seemed to be a case of Geoghegan's front wheel just losing traction. He was able to get back on the bike initially, but he looked pretty banged up. He looked like he had a sore wrist, and he eventually abandoned the race. He said he took a pretty big hit to the head. David Gaudu fortunately wasn't too hurt, and he managed to pace back up to the group and did a pretty good job actually in the finish for someone who just crashed so heavily. Remy Cavagna was able to take advantage of some of that chaos and people not knowing what had happened with that crash, and Jumbo-Visma weren't drilling it before the climb. Luis Leon Sanchez, the Spanish national champion for Astana Premier Tech, bridged across to him, and that was a very strong duo in undulating terrain before the final climb to Chiroubles. They managed to get about a 40-second gap on the peloton and were 15 seconds behind Julien Bernard, the lone remnant of the breakaway. At the start of the climb to Chiroubles, Cavagna looked like he'd blown up. Then you realise, oh, he's had a mechanical. His rear mech stopped shifting and he was stuck in the hardest sprocket at the back, and that was his race over. Really bad luck for him, although I don't think he and Luis Leon Sanchez would have stayed away anyway. Bernard and Luis Leon Sanchez had about a 25 to 30 second gap at this point, with 5.5 k's left on the climb. But Jumbo-Visma were pacing pretty hard with George Bennett, Jai Hindley on his wheel, David Gaudu on the left-hand side of Roglič as we look at it. Quentin Pacher, who was pretty strong in some of the Tour de France stages last year, attacked the B&B Hotel. But as they reached that second steep section, Luis Leon Sanchez knew what was coming, despite Pierre Latour trying one last-ditch attack towards the intermediate sprint. Primož Roglič launching on the right-hand side with Jon Izagirre. I'm not even sure he was able to get to his wheel. It looked in the front-on images like he was on his wheel, maybe for a bit, but what some would call a surprise early attack from Roglič with 3.1 kilometers to go. Many thought he'd wait until the last 500 meters, but it makes a lot of sense, him attacking at that point. It was at the end of the last steep section of the climb where he has the biggest advantage, and there's bonus seconds on offer at the intermediate sprint. So even if Roglič didn't have great legs after the initial burst, he could have sat up and waited to be collected by the group after collecting the bonus seconds, which he does there. All three of them. Michael Matthews, actually, who's climbing really, really well at the moment, went full send and tried to bridge across to Roglič, but he just wasn't able to as they went through this left-hand corner and it really flattens out on this climb. See the speed on the right hand side, 30 to 33 kilometers an hour for Roglič and the peloton. A draft really mattered, with him having about a 20-second lead with 1100 meters to go, and from 2Ks to 1K to go, and we didn't see those images. The group behind weren't working together particularly well. There were a lot of riders looking at each other, and with 900 meters to go when the camera panned back to them, you saw that Vlasov was about fourth wheel behind Schachmann. Hindley was pacing with Tish Benoot on his wheel, second wheel. But I think the way this group didn't work together particularly well, you see Vlasov attacking ahead of Hindley, Tish Benoot, and Schachmann then need to accelerate to chase him with McNulty on Schachmann's wheel. I think the way they didn't work well together almost guarantees the Roglič victory in this year's Paris-Nice. I'm not saying anyone should have jumped straight onto Roglic's wheel when he attacked at the end of that steep section. That's obviously ludicrous. But on the flatter section here, his relative advantage decreases and the strength in numbers in the group behind becomes a big advantage, especially when they're going 30 to 32 kilometers an hour. And in the last kilometer, when Tish Benoot and Schachmann pulled consistently, they were able to eat into that Roglic gap very quickly and brought back about 8 to 9 seconds on him. But it was too late at that point. Primož Roglič, the best one-week stage racer in the world, was already gone, and I don't think they would have been able to bring him back completely. But maybe the gap could have been a little bit smaller. But one thing is for sure, Primož Roglič, as expected, is in outstanding form in this year's Paris-Nice. His teammates Kruijswijk and Bennett worked really well on the lower slopes of the climb, and then Roglič did what he does best, surging on the steepest section to win the stage, take the yellow jersey, and extend his lead in the general classification over his GC rivals, who finished about 12 seconds behind him, led in by Maximilian Schachmann. So perfect timing for Roglič, and he's probably the best in the world at attacking in the middle of climbs on steep sections. We saw at the end of the last climb in stage 9 of the Tour de France last year when he collected those bonus seconds ahead of Tadej Pogačar, as well as stage 1 of the Vuelta last year when he attacked really late on the last climb when Kuss had softened up the group. I think it was in the last 400 meters at the end of the steep section. But anyway, here's the stage results. Roglič first, Schachmann second, 12 seconds behind in the group with Guillaume Martin, Tish Benoot, Alexander Vlasov, Lucas Hamilton, David Gaudu, very impressive to finish 7th after that crash, Quentin Pacher, Pierre Latour, and Jon Izagirre. Roglič going into the leader's jersey on stage 4 after winning the stage, just like we expected him to. 35 seconds ahead of Schachmann, 37 seconds ahead of McNulty, with Vlasov knocking on the door of the podium on 41 seconds. But more importantly, does anyone know what drink Roglič is drinking here? Is it grapefruit juice? What is it? Tomorrow's stage should be a sprint stage and have no change to the GC standings. Yes, there is that small climb in the last 20 kilometers, but it's not too threatening for the sprinters. And I think the trains will be able to bring back any move well before the finish. Sam Bennett, obviously the favourite. But if you want to catch up on any of the previous stages, hear all the broadcasters, or watch the stage live today or on the weekend as well. Hope you enjoyed the video. Paris-Nice has heated up in the last couple of days with the ITT. Like it down below if you did, and we'll see you with the highlights tomorrow. Ciao.